IT enthusiasts. Welcome to another episode of My Computer Careers Get Into IT Live, where we do just that, get into all things IT. I hope your Fridays are wonderful. I hope your week's been wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today during your lunch hour as we head into the holiday week. We're always so glad to have you here. And we're certainly glad to have our guest, who I will properly introduce here shortly. But just a reminder, this is an interactive discussion. It's designed to be that way. So it always goes better when we have you folks asking questions, commenting, talking to each other. And certainly we will get to any and all of those as the conversation goes on. And the conversation today is an important one. And if you've been tuning into this program for the last couple of years, you know it's one that we hit on pretty frequently because I think it's a valuable conversation, not just for our universe, but for our day and age. And that is beyond the 4-year degree, new paths to career success. That's what we're talking about today. It's a kind of an honest discussion about which education path is right for you. There's a healthy discussion about the value of traditional higher education and the possible viable alternatives for all of, millions and millions of skills warriors that might not fit into that traditional learning bucket. So I am pleased with that little intro to be joined by Dr. Steve Klein from Education Northwest, who's going to help us explore and better understand the pros and cons of the career education path. So Steve, welcome.
Thank you.
And Steve's joining us, by the way, from the West Coast. It's early for him. He's still working on his first cup of coffee. So bear with all of us. We're going to move through this thing, though. All right, Steve, very quick bio. Steve Klein. Dr. Steve Klein is a senior expert in career and technical education at Education Northwest. For more than 30 years, he has worked with federal and state agencies, school districts and colleges to design improved performance accountability, finance, and career pathway systems for CTE. Did I do that justice, Steve? Anything else you want to add?
That works.
Okay. All right. Why don't we dive right in? Okay. You know what? Actually, Steve, before we jump into the formal stuff and the questions, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about Education Northwest?
Oh, sure. Thanks. Education Northwest is a nonprofit. We're headquartered in Portland, Oregon, but we have offices all across the United States. And we are to support youth educators, state agencies, federal administrators in improving program performance. And we work across a wide variety of fields. So early childhood, tribal. I happen to work in career and technical education, but also dabble across the secondary and post-secondary with my colleagues. So we do research, policy evaluations, and very much love that. It's a great organization. I've been there 6 years now, and it's where I'll end my career.
Beautiful. So let's talk about that. You didn't just fall into Education Northwest. You didn't show up there out of nowhere. What sparked Steve, if you don't mind, what sparked your initial interest in career and technical education, especially coming from your kind of unique background as a high school math and science teacher?
Yeah, that's right. I started my career in public education, taught high school, and then also transitioned over and taught in a Quaker school in Philadelphia. I'll say to you that I was originally not a big fan of career and technical education. My brother was what I would call a traditional vocational student. He went through high school. He was tracked into CTE automotive, didn't have very good academic skills, really struggled initially. And so I wasn't a big fan. But one of the things I found when I started teaching was it was really challenging to teach algebra, for example, factoring in abstract terms. You'd put stuff up on the board, but students would often struggle with that because everybody has different modalities of learning. And what I started to do is try to change up how I taught. So for example, one of my classes, we were looking at the distance formula, V0t plus 1/2 GT squared, to calculate how far something falls. Yeah, scares me too. Well, I took the kids up on the roof with balls and stopwatches and we threw the balls up and timed them going up and down because of parabolic shape, and we were able to calculate distance. For my statistics class, I brought in M&Ms and triple beam balances and told them that the Mars Candy Company wants to evaluate, the average weight of an M&M. And they spent the whole period weighing them and then calculating means and standard deviations. I worked with the English teacher to come up with a strategy. We were teaching computers. This was in the early days. And so I asked her to assign a paper that had to be written using word processing software. So what I found in my career early on was that career and technical education offered a context for learning and applying ideas. And it answered that damning question, why do I need to know this? And so once I went back to graduate school in '88, the National Center for Research in Vocational Education, that's how long ago it was. And we'll talk more about that terminology in a bit. Okay. I'd just been awarded to UC Berkeley. And that's how I got my start. And so ever since then, I fell in love with it. And it played to my instincts about what's the best way to learn.
What a fantastic way to highlight the fact that people learn differently. And, to get through to certain students, you may need to do that. You go to the roof and you show them how it works, and then it sinks in. Makes sense. Okay. All right. Steve, we often hear the phrase high wage, high skill, in-demand jobs. Can you break that down for our viewers in kind of simple terms? Talk to me like I'm a fifth grader.
Yeah, well, so it's pretty jargony. It's, I think, also somewhat obvious in the sense that if you really break it down the simplest, it's high wage, right? You get compensated well for what you do. Yeah, in demand, there's significant job growth in the field. High skill, you got to have some sort of degree or certificate or something to show that you've got the skills. Let's to back up though. That terminology comes out of the Perkins legislation. So the Carl Perkins legislation it dates back really 1917. And on the screen, you're going to see a link to the U.S. Department of Education's webpage dealing with Perkins. So these are funds that go out to secondary and post-secondary, and they are used by educators to offer career and technical education. They're categorical, meaning that they're focused directly on career and technical education. So if the web page there, you can see on the left, Perkins 5, that's anything. If you were to click on that, it would provide you with really just about anything you want to know about Perkins 5. And then as you scroll down, one of the really interesting things, and this was a website my team originally built for the U.S. Department of Ed, and
got it.
AM now runs it. But basically, there's a link to all the legislation. So if you ever wanted to see what does Perkins mean, at the very bottom there's a link to, and it goes back in time, back to 1917. Anyway, there's on that page, there's a lot of other information that you can find. So states, as part of their Perkins plan, have to come up with strategies, descriptions of how they're going to move forward. And as part of that, they define high wage, high skill, and in demand. So every state has a different definition. They're somewhat parallel, but they all vary. And so, for example, District of Columbia, just as one example, they define a high wage as an occupation that's in the 25th percentile wage, equal to or greater than the most recent MIT Living Wage Index for one adult.
Oh,
on and on, right? I'm not going to go read all of these.
Right.
But the idea here is that states come up with the terminology for what they mean by high wage, what do they mean by high skill, and what do they mean by in demand. And within the context of technology and the field that you're all living in, I did some Googling before this, and things like cybersecurity, cloud computing, data science and analytics came up. So these are jobs that, not surprisingly, because they are highly skilled and you do need some sort of credential or certificate, will provide you with an entry and as a means of getting in the door. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that's sometimes just the beginning of a career. And then you can, sort of follow along on your career path and move forward. But these terms, high wage, high skill, in demand, they relate to specific types of jobs. And I think that all of you out there should be thinking about those jobs, and when you're going to be investing your time and money, where's the best return on investment?
So, Steve, you've been in the game for a while, and you've seen, I think you've seen some evolution in the way folks kind of look at technical education. Can you talk a little bit about what you've seen and how maybe it's evolved in your time?
Yeah, it has evolved a lot in my time. Although this gray hair is, it does.
At least you have hair, buddy. You have hair.
Yeah, well, I guess so. So career and technical education actually was voc ed, and early on, and this is back, at the turn of the century, the 21st century, 1900s. It was a way of providing instruction for students who sort of didn't fit in, who couldn't sit in a traditional academic classroom with their hands folded. They would be kinetic learners, or they were students who just this wasn't their interest area. And so it really was somewhat stigmatized. And it was treated as vocational education until about 2006, the federal legislation. So the federal legislation, and you see me, I'm going to refer back to the website in a little bit. It only puts out a very small, somewhere 5-10% of all funding spent on CTE comes from the feds, but it has a disproportionate effect on legislation and policies, because every school district and most community colleges in the country, and even some 4 years, get funding from Perkins. And so it does play a role. So in 2006, there was in the federal legislation, it was rebranded as career and technical education. And a lot of the national organizations, the Association for Career Technical Education, ACTE, and Advanced CTE, which is the State Directors Association, took on an effort nationwide to rebrand how it's termed. But in terms of the stigma, I think I sent yeah, there it is. So for those of you who maybe are driving and not able to see this, there's a picture of a bunch of birds, the canaries, working with tools. And it says, this is from the far side, and it's titled "Non-Singing Canaries Have to Take Woodshop." And boy, that just galls me. It's intended maybe at the highest level to talk about finding things that you are good at. But this was 1987. And right. What it was really saying is, when you think about a canary, well, what does a canary do? They sing, right? That's what they're and they die when they don't have oxygen. And yet, right. Here we are putting them in a wood shop because they're non-singing. Somehow they're inadequate. So that kind of stigma has, I think, dogged education, career and technical education. And, but over time, it's starting to change. And one of the reasons there's a lot of attention on career and technical education, there's sort of a cycle of interest. When the economy is doing poorly, everyone starts talking about career and technical education because we need to get people trained. We need to get retrained. They need skills. When the economy's banging along, career and technical education, like we are now, career and technical education is now being brought up again because we need skilled workers and we don't have them. And of course, it doesn't help when we take the people who are doing some of these jobs and export them. And so suddenly we have suddenly a need for workers. So in any case, I think there's a changing perception of career and technical education, and in part also because some of the field is moving towards away from just the trades, although the trades are certainly important, but also STEM, engineering. And so what you're seeing now is you're seeing programs that are oversubscribed for youth in high school and community college that are tech areas, because there's a recognition that these are well-paying jobs. May I say high skill, high wage, in demand.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, all right. So that all makes, I love the conversation, but I know that the conversation at the home starts early about which education path is going to be right for you. And I know, if I can just speak in generalities, I'll say that a lot of parents are gonna lean towards sending their kids to a 4-year university. And so, what's your response when those parents worry that choosing a technical path might limit their children's future options?
Well, so some of the reason that parents think that is that we've been sold a story about higher education. And not only that, and this is, I think, part of the sin of our educational system, is that we take very intelligent maybe not sort of abstract thinking, people could sit with their hands folded, and we make them feel bad about themselves. We make youth feel bad about themselves because they somehow can't learn in a way that, probably very small percentage of us thrive. I managed to make it through that system in spite of, not because of the way it was structured. Yeah. But there's also, and I think it's an understandable concern that people see, they have a fear that the trades, that technical education is somehow low status, that it's dirty, that it's limited earnings potential. And I think that to some extent, depending on the field, that could be a valid concern. That said, I'll just share this quick story. I have rental houses. Part of what I do on the side is, I'm an academic. I have a PhD. I'm sort of successful in all those different metrics. Right. The reason I'll retire someday is I bought houses, fixed them up, and rented them out. And I was talking to one of my renters one time. This is a student at a very prestigious, I won't mention the institution here in Portland area. Yeah. And they were graduating, and I said, "Oh, what are you going to?" After paying $40,000 to $50,000 a year per year for 4 years, I said, "What are you doing next?" And they said, "Well, it was really important to me to get my mind working, so I did a dual major in religious studies and philosophy." And I was like, "Oh, that's great. What are you going to do next?" And so I'll ask your listeners, was it Starbucks or Pete's? Because barista, right? I mean, those aren't really necessary skills. So what I would say to parents who are worried about this is know your kids, work with your kids, expose them to a lot of areas, explain and work with them to think about what does a career path look like? It's not just a job that you get when you get out. It's, I never liked Pete's, it was too good. It's not a career. It's not like one job is going to define your future. And so make sure your students, also your children, they're getting their academic skills. They're getting the basics. They should enjoy learning. Learn how to learn is the important thing. And then let them make choices. And as long as they've had an opportunity to experience the world and see the different types of careers that are out there, they'll be better equipped. I won't say they'll do it, but they'll be better equipped to make better life choices.
I always try and pull one or two quotes to walk away with from these conversations, because I firmly believe I get smarter when I talk to smarter people like yourself, Steve. Learn how to learn. It's just, it's simple, but it really applies in a lot of different ways. And I also appreciate your share, your personal share. Your background doesn't apply to everyone, but it also resonates with a lot of people. You went the traditional route. You have a doctor all the way to doctorate. But you're retiring because of your hands and because of your hard work there. Yeah. Okay. All right. I just want to mention, by the way, I found Steve via the Excerpt podcast. He joined and he kind of spoke on this similar topic. So I want to give them a little plug here and just say, obviously go check those folks out because they're doing great work as well. And I also want to make the point, and I know that Steve would agree, this isn't a conversation that traditional higher ed isn't a viable path. It certainly is, and it is for a lot of people. But we're, trying to make the point that there are options, and of course, the career option is a strong one for so many people. So with that said, that little PSA, we're seeing decent salaries for some technical roles out there, right out of training. How sustainable are those entry-level opportunities, though, Steve?
So that's a great question. And my answer is, it depends on the field. Right. There are occupations right now, and actually the Wall Street Journal did an article on this recently, looking at employers coming in and hiring kids, right, high school students right out of high school, in fields like welding, machining, advanced manufacturing. There are a lot of jobs where you can walk out and make a very good initial salary. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's a salary that has a very, that's going to continuously increase and move on. So there are, and in IT, like cybersecurity, I would think is another one of those fields where you can walk out and make a very good initial wage. That said, I also think that there feels like interpretive dance and poetry that we also need people to do, right?
Right.
They may
Yep.
not pay as well though. And so the important point here isn't necessarily to chase the dollar. For me, it's more thinking about a career path and how is that pathway sort of defined? What are the steps that one would take over the course of their career to move up and get more responsibility, and with that, higher wages? And so, just as an example, we've been working in the District of Columbia with the Office of the Deputy Mayor, looking at the programming that's being offered in the district. And one of the things that has come out there is that some of the jobs that really pay well are not jobs that you get right out of school, whether it's high school or right out of a technical program. Those are jobs like construction manager, for example, and a lot of the management positions. You don't graduate from high school or come out of a technical training if you do a 3-month certificate or 7 months and suddenly you're now managing everyone, right? So it may be your initial step in this process is going to be in demand. It might be high-ish skill, but it might be okay wages. But what happens is over time, if you're thoughtful about what you're doing and you're continuously learning, then you have the opportunity to move up and gain the skills that you need so that someday you can become that manager. You can move into some sort of supervisory position or otherwise open your own company, right? So the answer here is yes, there are some jobs for sure. You walk out and it's certainly coming out of IT, you're going to be better advantaged than somebody coming out of English. But again, that's only the start. It's not the end point.
In our little world, folks, you've heard this a million times on this program. Do not be afraid of the help desk. Jump on the help desk, work your way up. Listen to everything that Steve just said. Never stop learning, make yourself invaluable, keep moving forward. That's how you get to that role that you want and that career you want. I love it. I genuinely do. Steve, so we talk about students and parents, but obviously employers are on the hook here as well. And play a kind of a vital role. What role do you see employers kind of playing in modern technical education, and what makes for a quality training program, from their standpoint?
Yeah. And, it's interesting because in a lot of countries, European countries, apprenticeship, the employer role is very well defined and people work together to offer opportunities. But, here in the States, what we tend to have is, I would say, point to point sort of episodic connections that go on. And so what ends up happening, unfortunately, is that employers are often seeing their involvement as charity versus something that offers a return on investment. So rather than ask employers to constantly like, hey, can you give us money? Can you donate equipment to us? Where employers, I think, really could play an important role would be to come in and work with the educators to look at, well, what standards are you teaching to and how are you doing that? That would be the curriculum. What assessments are you offering and what credentials are you either offering or setting students on a path to earn? And so then there's also, they could look at the equipment and say, okay, here's what you have. Here's how you can use it efficiently. You don't have to you could get the highest level computing system, or you could get, I call it the MacGyver effect, a paper clip and thread and teach to that. Yep. So the trick is you certainly want to offer students authentic experiences, but the employers are the ones who are going to be hiring these individuals after they leave. And so they should be thinking about and working with educators to say, hey, academics, these are the things. Technical skills, these are the things. And then there's something called employability skills, which are the skills, as I often say, that they're not going to get you hired, but they're going to keep you from getting fired. Teamwork, showing up on time, communication.
Yes.
So employers have an important role to play in terms of within the school, helping to ensure what's being offered is aligned to what the industry needs. And then also offering internships, teacher externships. A lot of teachers are teaching based on, even in career technical education, what they learned years earlier. They retired and now they're in the field, they're teaching. And so I think that employers have an important role to help elevate the education field by saying, this is what we need to be competitive internationally and domestically. And here's how you can help us find the individuals who then will be in a much better position to get the high wage high school.
Steve, I think you made a really important point, and it seems so obvious, but employers working essentially with school districts or schools to help develop their curriculum. I'm guessing we could spend a whole other episode on this, but I'm going to ask the loaded question. Is something preventing that from happening?
I think that there's a disconnect between how people speak about terminology, how educators are used to working, how employers are used to working. There's also, look, employers are really, really busy. I did a project years back. I had this idea. I used to work at a Haagen-Dazs, right? We all had, not actually, youth don't work as much as they used to, but I worked all through high school. Yep. And, I learned time to lean is time to clean. But youth don't necessarily have an opportunity. And part of the challenge here is, look, Intel doesn't want to hire high school kids to come in. They're not going to contribute to the business model. But there are jobs, and I would say, look at McDonald's. There's biology, chemistry. I wrote a post on LinkedIn about this, about why aren't we connecting educators with employers and connecting the curriculum as well? Why wasn't I, when I was working at Haagen-Dazs, writing a paper for English about the dairy industry and or biology or chemistry or finance? I took money all day. And so, I think that what the challenge also is we need intermediaries, people who can, teachers are really busy. Employers are really busy. So somebody needs to be able to come in and serve as an intermediary and help set up these internships, help monitor them, right? You don't want to put youth or young adults out in the field not being supervised.
Yeah.
And then to deal with issues like, safety issues for the insurance and transportation.
Right. It's a fascinating discussion. I love it. Rick, we see you out there. Yep. Thank you, Patricia. Rick, thank you so much. Hi, Steve. Thanks for joining. Great to see you out there again, Rick. We won't take points off for you being late. All right. Let's talk about students again. You are more than ever, I think students young folks put a little pressure on themselves. And when I say students, I shouldn't just say young folks, students of all ages, put pressure on themselves to determine what's right for them in terms of learning, in terms of next steps, in terms of a career change. How can they best evaluate whether they're better suited for that traditional college route or a technical path, Steve?
So it assumes a sort of dichotomy here that you do one or the other. And I think that one of the answers here is know yourself. I just find that I have periods of clarity. Like I'll be just going through life, maybe 6 months, and all of a sudden I'll have this epiphany, right? And suddenly everything becomes crystal clear. And I start asking myself questions. What am I doing? And I think that part of the challenge here is in an age of distractions, when we all have social media and Facebook and silly cat videos to look at, that we don't spend enough time with ourselves. And I think that what's really important is to think about what it is that excites you. What is it that fulfills you when you're doing things? And, it's okay to try something and find out you don't like it. But it also can be, I think we have this view that people move lockstep through life in terms of sort of their cognitive, emotional, physical development. And the reality is youth, adults, we all grow up. Some don't, but many of us grow up at different ages and stages of our lives. And so you might be that what you do is you graduate high school, you go to college, community college, or maybe you go out and you work for a while, and then you figure out what it is because you're thinking and you're exploring the field and thinking and seeing what else is out there. And then you say, okay, I've got some skills now. I want to put those in a context or reconceptualize these in a new framework. And then you go back to school. So my brother, who I mentioned before, was a traditional voc ed. He graduated, went to college, dropped out, bummed around, became a cop. He's 50, he's like 55 now, and he's retired. And I'm 62 and I'm still working. Who's the dummy, right? So So you don't have to like move lockstep through life. It's okay to go out, try things, pick up a certificate, go out and work with it for a while, see what's next, and then continue your development. It's not that your learning stopped when you graduated from high school.
You know, I'm obviously I'm not afraid to say, and you and I talked about this ahead of this when we spoke earlier this week. I'm one of those folks. You know, I didn't technically, I didn't grow up until late 20s, early 30s. I was not ready for the traditional college route. You know, and looking back on that, it's very obvious. But at the time, it was you went to college. That's what you do. So I think that's why this discussion's so important.
And just like, I'm going to just throw one other thing on here, and that is, I think we have to recognize there's societal pressures at play here. There are cultural pressures at play. Parents have an effect on youth, right? What social capital you have in terms of growing up. What do you see in terms of the types of jobs that are out there? And then I think there's whether we like it or not, there's discrimination, and there's also, for example, females often face in career and technical education a challenge because I was talking to an automotive instructor at one school, and he said to me, you know, girls just don't like my program, don't like automotive. They're not good at it. And I was like, I was like, well, why? And he said, they just don't like getting grease under their fingernails. Good Lord, right there was the reason why girls were not going on in their programs. Yeah. So you really have to recognize that, and I say this to the people who are out there, don't let other people, don't let society, don't let your friends tell you what you should or shouldn't do. Own your life. Look at the options that are out there, fight the good fight where you need to, and follow your passion. Because if you don't, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Yep. Beautiful. All right. You know, Steve, looking ahead here, you know, I mentioned career changers. Obviously, many of the folks in our universe are career changers. And just for those people here and elsewhere, what advice do you have for adults considering a switch to these technical fields?
So one thing is, don't just chase the money. I'll give you an example. A good buddy of mine was a biologist, went through a 4-year college, got an advanced degree, couldn't make enough money, didn't feel like he was being fulfilled there. So he took up an apprenticeship and he went to be an electrician. Became an apprentice. It's a very long process that he followed. He hated it. But now he was stuck because he had sort of the golden handcuffs, if you will. He chased what he thought was a way of making money really quickly. And he ended up, you know, it wasn't super quick, but he did succeed. And then he hated life. So, you know, I would say that if you're considering making a change, if you're considering just shaking things up a bit, you have to think about, first of all, again, go back to who are you? Do you know yourself? Do you know enough about the field that you're interested in pursuing? So you're not just signing up for courses because today that looked good to you.
Right.
And then undo your own ROI. I mean, this is easy. You can do this with Excel. You can do this with, frankly, a piece of paper and pencil. How much money is it going to cost me to do this training? What are my expenses while I'm doing it? When I graduate, what's the average earnings? What kind of jobs can I get? And you can also do informational interviews and talk to people and find out. And then make a decision. So I'm not saying don't follow your passions, but know that if your passion is, I don't know, making coffee, that you're not going to necessarily, you'll make some great coffee, as long as it's not Pete's. Right. But you may not, sorry, Patricia, you may not, make a lot of money. But if that's your passion, go for it. Right. Just know that you're going to make compromises. I hope you like ramen kind of thing.
This should sound, if you've been paying attention to this conversation, folks, you should take away those themes. Follow your passion, do your research, don't chase money. And if you want to get to that point where you're making a lot of money, then hustle and you'll get there. Certainly. All right, Steve, technical programs, are you think they're keeping up? Are they adapting to the way technology is changing, or is that an issue?
Well, so that's a challenge also. So it depends on, of course, the provider. At the high school level, it can be really hard to offer a lot of programs with capital intensive, meaning lots of equipment, particularly if it's expensive stuff. Community colleges often can bring up programs, churn them up and offer training on it. Sometimes they do that in combination with employers. But so one of the things I like to do, there's something called ACTE Vision. It's the Association for Career and Technical Education.
Yep.
Is the membership organization for career and technical education administrators and educators. And I love going to Vision, and I love walking the sales floor. So they bring in all these vendors. You got to imagine like 2 football fields of just vendors with every kind of tool. And I kind of go meta, if you will, and I just walk around and I observe what I'm seeing. And what I'm seeing a lot right now is AI and AR and VR. So there's augmented reality, virtual reality, and it makes a lot of sense. We wouldn't want to put a youth working with a live person doing, trying to staunch, a bleeder, an artery. We didn't want to put a high school kid or a community college or a technical person on a $1 million lathe spinning at, thousands of revolutions a minute, and they screw up and the whole thing explodes and they get killed, right? So there's these VR and AR strategies where you can actually work the machines and make the mistakes. They have this for forklifts and truck driving. And then once you've mastered that, then you can go and put yourself in a real life situation. So I think what I'm seeing is that we're going to see more of this virtual instruction. And we also are going to see, I think that like in the tech, a lot of distance learning and the ability to gain those skills. But I do think that some of these advances, particularly in AI, are going to, so we'll go back to this theme here, may make some of these jobs go away. Now, we don't know. It's really hard, crystal ball, to say that. But I will say this. Anything that involves a touch, anything that involves hands-on is going to be harder to offshore or to transfer over to a computer. I've yet to see the computer that's going to change the clutch on my car.
Right. I just, that made me think. I read this week there was a study. Gartner just came out what they're looking ahead on AI, and I think they said that, or they assume through all of their research that 40% of the AI conversation in business is going to die, is going to go away, because right now it's it's not fully invested. They don't know the full ROI, and down the road, it's not going to be something that they're going to want to fully invest in. So, we're at that point where AI is blossoming and booming and it's so important. But we may be seeing the bubble burst a little bit, as happens.
Sure.
So interesting. I don't know, just an aside. Sorry. Happened to see that. All right. Our next question is about combining traditional education with technical education, but I think you've touched on that a bit. So I think we can move past that. I really want to end this conversation with this question, because I think it's an important one, especially after hearing your passion and listening to what you have to say, Steve. What excites you most about the future of technical education?
Wow. So there's a lot going on in the field now that is promoting it's the career technical education. It's breaking down some of the stigma that's associated with it. I think that the reality is that and I want to be really clear, a baccalaureate degree is still a degree, an award, depending, of course, again, where you study, in what field, that is going to set you up in the long term to be successful, just on the law of averages. So I'm not suggesting that college isn't still a viable option. I think that, however, there's a recognition that we need people to do a lot of the jobs that are high wage, high skill, and demand, right? That require training that you can't offshore, and that you can't like delegate to some sort of a machine to do, right? You can get robotics, but somebody still has to make the machine work. And so what I'm excited about is this sort of, at least societally, a beginning movement towards recognizing the value and honoring the skills that individuals have who are highly trained in fields that maybe aren't like sitting down and rubbing your chin and writing a paper that, 4 people read, which was frankly most of my career. And so, I think that there's a change that's happening. There's the recognition that college is expensive and it's not for everybody, or it's not for everybody right away.
Right.
And so there needs to be we need to recognize that there's a return on investment, and that return on investment in some cases are going to push you off much later in life. And that's like going for a baccalaureate or a master's or a PhD.
Yep.
Or you can also go out, work, gain skills, make a very good, you will make more money more than likely if you graduate high school, graduate community college, graduate a training program, and go out and work in the field. You will initially make more money, but you will have a truncated earning stream unless, go back to this, you're constantly exploring your options. You're being, as you said, are you entrepreneurial? Are you thinking about what it is that you need to do to move ahead? So that's what excites me. I think the field's changing. I think that there are a lot of organizations like yours that are out there offering skills training, but it also, it requires that the people walking in the door have an understanding of what they're signing up for, what's the cost of that they're going to incur in doing that, what's the return that they will get, and how can they stack credentials and grow experience. Because that, to me, that's what's exciting, is that it's a point of entry that I think offers people an opportunity to pursue a passion, get good at something, earn a living wage, family living wage, feel respected, which I think is really what do we want?
Folks, that is a perfect stopping point. Steve, I learned so much from this conversation, and not just in what you offered and I think all of the great information and advice and you offered, but again, your passion on the subject, and your excitement about the viability of the technical education path. It obviously comes through. I recommend that you do that for a living. I think you're doing a great job.
Thanks. Well, I enjoyed being here, and thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely.
And to all of your people out there, good luck.
We would certainly love to have you back at any point. Folks, go check out Steve. We will put his LinkedIn in the chat. You can go check him out. Go check out Education Northwest if you happen to be inclined. And then also, I think we have a link to the Excerpt podcast if you want to subscribe or go check those folks out as well. So as always, I thoroughly enjoy this time every Friday so that I can get smarter. I hope everyone feels the same. We will not be here next week for the holiday, but we'll be back obviously the following week. We're going to talk about some career advice, and we're actually going to specifically talk about AI and career advice. So to your point, Steve, AI isn't going anywhere. Rick, thank you obviously for the support here. And everyone, please have a fantastic weekend. And Steve, please do the same.
You got it. Thank
you.
All
right. If you don't mind hanging just for a second, Steve.
Sure.
All right. Thanks.